So today's class is on data fundamentals and how those apply to your digital fundraising program. But before we kind of get into that, a few things. I know I have office hours every week on Wednesdays, except for tomorrow because I have dental surgery. So there will be no office hours tomorrow. But we'll be back to regular office hours next week. Let's see. I wanted to check in on how peer pairs are going for y'all. I know that Jordan has matched everybody up, but we have let's see, there's one person who is unmatched right now because one of the participants of this cohort who had to drop out. And so we're working on, it's Melissa with the Anchor Center for Blind Children. We're working on getting you connected to a new peer, and that should be handled in the near future. And you can also see your peer pairs in the Google Drive folder as well. And while we're talking about Google Drive, I'll just go ahead and screen share and look at all of that. Okay, so here we go. We're in Level Up Course 1. This is where class recordings are. So if you want to go back and look and review one of the classes, you'll find the recordings of the class in this folder. Homework assignments are in this folder, and there's just the two. There's the strategic plan and the campaign plan assignment. Support materials are in this folder, and I'll walk through that in just a second. The syllabus for your reference is here, and then peer pairs is in this Google Sheet, and you can see here everybody is listed out, along with the contact information, and then also your Colorado Gives page. In terms of support materials for lesson 2, there's several support materials this time around. There are benchmarks. There are key fundraising takeaways from the M&R report. M&R is an entity that aggregates data that's submitted from a variety of nonprofits across the country, and they then perform analysis on that data and release a report with key insights for nonprofits. If you have never looked at the M&R report before, I encourage you to do so. It's a really great resource, but if you don't have time to read the whole thing, we've prepared key takeaways for you in this document. The digital benchmarks are also derived from the M&R report, and these are key metrics that can kind of give you a sense of where other organizations are performing, like across the board within the nonprofit space, so that you can have a sense of how you match up with your peers. Okay, there's also a donor journey example, and that's an example of how someone might traverse the donor pathway, going from like awareness all the way to convert and then on to like retain and cultivate. And we'll get into that a little bit more during this lesson. There's also, let's see, some fundraising takeaways that are specifically applicable to Colorado Gives Day. That document is right here. Making the most of MightyCause is a resource that we prepared that goes into a little bit more of some of the tools that are available within MightyCause so that you can maximize that platform. And then mapping against the donor pathway, this is something that we'll get into more in class today, but this provides you with a lot, this support material provides you with a lot more information around all of the different like metrics and KPIs that you'll want that are worth considering when you are thinking about each of the pathway points, and that will map onto your strategic plan. Any questions on any of the stuff that's in the drive? Yeah. Okay, great. Let's see. What else do I need to go through? Okay, so I want to quickly walk through what is all entailed in the campaign plan homework assignment, because you'll start working on that next month. And that's what the third class is going to be about. So I want to give you a little bit of a preview of that. You'll start working on the outline for the campaign plan in class next month. And you will review with your peer pair outside of class. And then the final plan you'll submit into the Google Drive folder for assignments by September 12th. These are the submission guidelines. There's the link to the assignment folder and the support material folder. All of those are within the Google Drive folder. The basic details of the assignment is that you will be developing, the purpose of the assignment is for you to develop a campaign plan for Colorado Gives Day, as well as if you want to, for like your end of year fundraising like plan, if you want to do something a little bit more comprehensive, that's fine too, or Colorado Gives Day is folded into that. There are some things that I recommend including in the plan. And you will have resources related to this, including a campaign outline for you to follow and make use of. Although, of course, as with the strategic plan for your fundraising program, you should feel free to adapt this based on your needs. Does anyone have questions about this assignment or what they'll need for next class? Okay. I think that is, Jordan, is there anything that you wanted to do in terms of announcements or reminders? Because I think that's everything for me before I go ahead and get into the lesson.
No, I think that's fabulous. Thank you so much. I guess my one reminder would be that we are working on releasing the toolkits, resources, messaging specific to Colorado Gives Day within the next couple weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And then the other thing I'll mention, which I'll also reiterate in the follow-up email, is just to take a look at this point at your organization page on Colorado Gives. You have this great tool that shows you where you can be making updates within the resources that Elsa reviewed. So just start to consider the updates and customizations that you can, easily make on your organization page to refresh that as you're learning more about, how to present your organization on a digital fundraising space. So if you have any questions about Colorado Gives, how to use it, you can always email me. And then, of course, please keep taking advantage of the office hours with Elsa. That's it from me.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. So today we're going to be focusing on applying and interpreting data in your work, the challenges of obtaining and using data, taking a look at benchmarks, practical strategies for data collection and analysis, and then you'll also have some in-class time to continue working on your strategic plan. All right, so first up, around collecting data. It can be really a lot to think about data collection. And I know that a lot of you are in small nonprofits where you may not have, where you may be the only person perhaps on your fundraising team, or you may be wearing multiple hats. There may be only two people. So it's a lot to handle. And so that's why I'm really trying to keep this laser focused so that you can actually figure out what data to collect and do so in a way that you can continue forward and is actually useful to you. So when you're thinking about what data to collect, you want to think about what is going to be useful for your decision making. How will the data that you collect help you to understand the impact of your strategy and the campaigns that you're running? And what do you need to know to make improvements and strategic changes in planning and campaign execution? Those two questions should really help guide what type of data that you collect and you care about, because you could collect hundreds of different data points, right? There's so much that you could collect when it comes to data, but what's actually useful to you, what will you actually look at and use? That's what you want to zero in on, and that's what you want to actually collect and then analyze. Data should really help you answer these two very important questions. Is anything unexpected happening? And am I on track to meet my goals? And when I say, is anything unexpected happening, let's say that you are looking at data from an email campaign and you're seeing like a really high bounce rate, or almost like a very, very low click rate that is not in line with what you see in the past for campaigns. When something like that happens, that's a flag for you to look and see, is there something wrong with the tool? What is going on? Why isn't this campaign performing? So looking at data related to those kinds of things helps you fix problems early on before they become, a really big issue, and a campaign just kind of, fizzles out or goes down. Am I on track to meet my goals? You should be thinking about what kinds of data you need to collect to help you understand what, if you're actually on track to meet your goals. And that's really what key performance indicators are about. And that's why it's important to set some key performance indicators when you are developing both your campaign plan and your fundraising plan for your entire fundraising program. Let me see. Key metrics, data points. Sorry, I'm looking at I have two outlines here. Trying to make sure I'm on track. Oh yes, there was one other thing before we kind of get into this narrative example that I wanted to say, is that it can be a little confusing to think about metrics and KPIs and goals and how they're sort of related together. A goal is a little bit more both like big picture and also like targeted, whereas a metric can be like anything that you need to measure. It could be donors, it could be donations, it could be completion rate of a form. And key performance indicators are sort of the specific direction of metrics and like where you want them to go. So for example, you may want to see an increase in email signups. That may be a key performance indicator when you are in the acquisition stage of trying to create, to build up new leads. Does that make sense so far in terms of the difference between those? Hearing nothing, I'm assuming that it does make sense.
Can I just ask a really quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Can you just give us an example of a key performance indicator and a metric?
Yes. Let's see, did I build that? I think I only put this in my notes, which is kind of my bad here. So I'm going to go ahead and I wrote out all these examples. So I'm just going to drop these in the chat so that you can see them there. Okay, so an example goal could be to grow your sustainer program by 10%. And an example key performance indicator for multiple parts of the pathway could be increasing email signups, maintaining or increasing the click rate on your email campaigns, the conversion rate on donation appeals. Metrics would be the number of email signups or just email signups, period. Email campaign click rate, new donors, and everyone who saw the appeal. Those are metrics. There's no real value attached to metrics. It's just information. That information becomes meaningful when you set one of those things as a key performance indicator with a specific desired outcome for it, like increasing the conversion rate or increasing the click rate, or decreasing your unsubscribe or something like that. And then the goal is like larger. It's related to like the outcome of your campaign or the outcome of your overall fundraising program. Is that, do you have a follow-up question, or does that kind of help clarify things?
No, that's good. That's just what I needed. Thank you.
Sure, sure, my pleasure.
Now I have to confess I'm a bit more confused. Wouldn't a SMART goal actually incorporate everything in your KPI and your metric?
Yes, I guess it would, but this is kind of breaking it out so that you can all of the different pieces of that, and think about how those apply to your plan. So like, I feel like what you're talking about with a SMART goal is like, it's a holistic look at what at the goal and how it breaks down. I think this is just a different way of breaking that information down.
Okay, it's basically a SMART goal that's been taken apart.
Yeah, deconstructed, if you will.
Measurable, you've got a data point, you know, sustainable, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like, I think when it comes to SMART goals, like it's sort of SMART, like assesses, right, the goal quality. This is like how you operationalize this, I think, is one way to look at it. So like if you have a goal that's measurable and all, you know, and all of those things, then you actually need to like also know what metrics you're measuring and what your key performance indicators for that goal is. So it's sort of just like looking at it through a different lens.
Okay.
And to
Thank you.
to that point, we're going to go ahead and walk through what it looks like to map the pathway. And I'm starting out with this narrative example that doesn't actually tell you about the pathway points, because I want you to have this in your head, because once we actually walk through each of the points along the donor pathway again, I'm going to come back to this and we're going to do an exercise with everyone in class where we identify which point along the pathway this person is at various points along in the narrative. And you'll see this slide again. So it's not like you have to like memorize this narrative. But I'm going to give everybody a minute or two to actually read this, and then I'll continue on. All right. Does anyone need more time to read? Okay, great. I try and give a little bit extra time because I've created this. And so my feeling about how long it takes to read it is always faster than everyone else's. All right. So now that we've got this narrative in our heads, we're going to go ahead and walk through what it looks like to map the donor pathway. So as a refresher, this is the nonprofit donor pathway. You've probably heard this called a marketing funnel in the past. And this is really just a customized look at what a marketing funnel is within the context of nonprofit donor fundraising. So you have your attract, acquire, nurture, and convert stage. And then you have, after you've converted someone and they become a donor, then you move into retaining that donor and cultivating that donor so that they continue to give for years to come. This is the definition of each of these stages. And if you want to have this resource pulled up while you are working on stuff later on in class, all of this information is available within the Google Drive folder in the support materials for lesson 2. So for the donor pathway, for the first point along that attraction, that is where you are going to raise awareness to attract new prospects. So folks who've never heard of you or folks who aren't very knowledgeable about who you are, that's the stage where you're like trying to get them interested. Acquire, just like it sounds, that's where you gain interest and you get people to sign up for your newsletter or for your email list or some kind of action related to that. It's usually list building is usually the key activity within the acquisition stage. Nurture is where you, as the name implies, you keep people engaged and interested. You nurture that relationship so that it continues. And once that has that relationship is solid, then you can start working to convert someone into a donor. Once they have become a donor, then you want to retain those donors. And I think we all know how hard retention is for first-time donors. It hovers around 30% most years, like on the whole within the field. But it's really critical, because once you retain someone and you've gotten them through that first year mark, they're likely to remain a loyal donor for many years to come. Cultivate is sort of related to retention, but I like to split it out because it's really about how you can not only nurture the relationship and cultivate it further, but it's also about upselling, getting folks to become more invested, either through increasing their giving year over year, or whatever other kind of goal you have in mind for your donor audience, your multi-year donors. Like, what do you want them to do next? That cultivate stage is where you're really focused on that. All right. And so when I talk about mapping the pathway, I've created these slides for each of the different points along the pathway and some of the things to be thinking about for those. So for attract, the focus again is raising awareness to attract new prospects. And what we've done is I've identified some key metrics that you typically do want to pay attention to for the purposes of this particular point along the pathway, as well as some suggested key performance indicators. These are suggestions, again, especially when it comes to key performance indicators. Key performance indicators are going to be unique somewhat to you and your organization and what your goals are for your prospective donors. But this is supposed to serve as a guide. So for key metrics for attract, for your website, you would want to pay attention. You would want to measure things like the number of users, what's your overall traffic volume, where is that traffic coming from, maybe what the average engagement rate is of folks on your website. You may want to know how different keywords are ranking. If you're running ads, you're going to want to know about clicks and impressions on those ads. And for social media, you're going to want to know the reach of your posts. You're going to want to understand the impressions, and you're going to want to know about like mentions and other sort of activity around anything that you're putting out there on social. Some of the key tactics for this stage include digital ads and content creation. For the acquisition stage, some of the key metrics to pay attention to for a website would be form conversion rate. That's like how many people have like come to a sign up page versus who actually signed up. You want to know what your top landing pages are. For ads, you're going to want to start paying attention to conversion rate and maybe cost per acquisition. Email, you're going to be focusing around click rate and unsubscribe rate. You'll note here that open rate is not a metric that's listed anymore. And the reason for that is that open rate has become a very unreliable metric due to privacy changes with email. And so it's very difficult to ascertain accurately. In fact, impossible to understand accurately anymore how many users have actually opened an email. And so organizations like M&R benchmarks that we talked about, they don't look at open rate anymore for this year. For the first time, they didn't even consider it. And I'm recommending that organizations typically move away from a focus on open rate, because it's very difficult to have that be a meaningful metric. Let's see, Brianna, you want to know how or where you can find website rates. So to find information about your website, you would need to have tracking on your website. Google Analytics is the platform that we use for website tracking, but there are many other platforms out there that you can explore. But that's the one that we use. It's free to set up. You have to put code on your site and then that will do basic tracking. Usually need someone who is a professional or really understands website tracking setup to do any kind of more advanced tracking, like form completions and things like that. You have to create, you have to basically write code to track that. And that's outside of like just tracking like page views and things of that nature. All right. For Acquire, for KPIs, you're going to want to think about things like how many leads did you generate, and then what's your lead retention rate potentially. You could also have as a key performance indicator the click rate for your welcome series. So it really depends on you. So please take this as a guide, not as a mandate. When you get to the nurture point along the pathway, things that would matter would include, for in terms of metrics to pay attention to, would be again website traffic, return visitors if you're interested in seeing how many people are coming back to your site. For email, it's going to still be click rate and unsubscribe rate are going to be important. And then for social, engagement rate and type of engagements is going to become more critical, as you're really thinking about that deeper level of engagement with folks beyond someone just seeing something. How are they interacting with it? Key performance indicators for this stage might be click rate, unsubscribe rate, or conversion rate, or all three. For the convert point along the pathway, you're going to want to think about things like for email, click rate and conversion rate. So that would be like if someone clicks on a link and then completes an action, like let's say you send an email out and you want someone to sign up for an event and they do. Your conversion rate would be the number of people who clicked versus those who like completed the whole action and actually signed up. For conversion, online giving in particular, you're going to want to pay attention to things like the donor type. Are they new donor? Are they an existing donor? What type of gift? Is it recurring? Is it one time? The amount of the donation, the number of gifts and donors, and the source of the donation. Did it come through email? Did it come through text? Did it come from direct mail? Being able to understand the source of your donations helps you to know where to funnel more of your resources, right, when you're planning out a campaign. What is the industry standard for click rates? Mo, I will be getting to that a little bit later on, but that's a great question. That's where when we get into benchmarks later on today, that will be one of the things that we cover. Let's see. So the other thing for convert is when you're thinking about key performance indicators here, conversion rate, new donors, and average gift size are some typical key performance indicators. But again, this is going to be dependent on what your goals are for your organization. In the retention stage, it's really going to be all about email and online giving metrics like click rate and subscribe rate. And then for online giving, of course, retention rate is the big metric that you're going to want to pay attention to. And then for KPIs, having a new donor retention rate of a certain amount, approximately 30% is like right now kind of industry standard. Multi-year donor retention rate typically hovers around 60%. Of course, this is different by organization. These numbers are a reference to the benchmarks for like a larger sampling of nonprofits. So when you're thinking about your benchmarks, you're going to want to not just rely on external benchmarks, but you're going to want to benchmark yourself, because that's going to be more meaningful to work against rather than an external benchmark. Although external benchmarks are also useful for kind of understanding how you're situated within the rest of the nonprofit space, and if you are kind of tracking in a similar way to other nonprofits that are like you, or whether you're doing a lot better, or maybe you're behind in some places, and so you want to like take a closer look at certain aspects of your program. Let's see, Jordan is saying in comments, remember that your organization has built-in retention reports. That's right, which is a really great feature of of MightyCause for sure. That's really important. Okay, so the final point along the pathway is that cultivation. And here you're going to want to pay attention to things like form conversion rate for email. Again, it's going to be click rate, unsubscribe rate, and then conversion rate again. And for online giving, it's going to continue to be retention rate, but then also upgrade. So of those who are current donors, when a new year rolls around, did they increase their giving? That's going to be a really important thing to know. And so then your key performance indicator might be the number of upgrades, or it might be an upgrade amount. And then you also may want to know what the conversion rate is on upsells. So if you're running as part of a campaign, targeted messaging to current donors that's aimed at increasing their level of giving, you're going to want to know what the conversion rate is on those emails. Okay, any questions about what we've just walked through as it relates to the pathway? Okay, so what I want us to do now is think about this narrative again, and I want to us to identify, pardon me, where along the pathway Rebecca is throughout this narrative. So when we are at the beginning, she hears about from colleagues about a workshop for CAEE and attends that workshop. And then she has a positive experience and she starts to receive their newsletter. What are the pathway points that she is on here? Yes, Margie?
I think what I'm hearing is that she was attracted there. So she went at the beginning, she went through the attract pathway and then was acquired because she attended a certification. And so maybe she might be landed on the nurturing phase where, she is more, they're trying to get her more involved.
Yes, that's right. She really gets into the nurture phase once she starts to receive that newsletter, and continues to get emails from CAE about the organization. So you are right on the money. And here, like in the second paragraph, where she continues to get emails and starts following CAEE on social media, that's like just a deeper level of like that nurturing and engagement. That's so important. And continuing along, you have the following year, she receives a targeted donation appeal during Colorado Gives Day with a message thanking her for participating. What part, and then she, sorry, I lost my place for a second. She receives a brief message from a program participant about how the certification process benefited them as well. After this message, she is motivated to give a one-time donation. So here, what stage has she moved into?
He was converted.
Yes, exactly.
He became a donor.
Yeah. All right. And then in the final paragraph, and a lot of times I think in our heads, the story ends there, right? It's like, awesome, I converted this person, fantastic. Story time's over. Everything is good, but not so fast. There's a third paragraph. So she keeps receiving regular messages, and the following year, she receives a thank you for a donation from the prior year with a specific ask to upgrade to a recurring donor. And because she's been kept up to date on CAE's work, she decides to become a monthly supporter. So what is happening in that paragraph? What pathway points is she passing through here?
I think because she's engaged now with the information and what the organization is doing, she's been retained. But if she became a monthly donor, they're cultivating her. She's been cultivated to increase her donation and engagement through donation.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
I feel like this scenario is like the best of all cases. Like, just
Oh,
send an email and all of a sudden you get a donation. We send monthly emails. We post weekly on social media. And so I guess my question is like just sending that email and posting isn't enough. And I think one of the things within this scenario that maybe is worth pointing out is the specific targeted information that this individual, Rebecca, is receiving. And so my question is how do we implement processes to make sure content is relevant? Because just sending emails, and if it's not the content that they are interested in, that's not going to be enough for somebody to donate or to upgrade their donation to reoccurring or to a larger gift.
Yeah, so that really goes back to, I think, platforms and being able to, and resources too, right? Because being able to create targeted messaging and then send that messaging to the right people assumes that you have both the time, the resources, and the tools necessary to actually segment your list and to write customized messaging within a campaign rather than blanket messaging that just goes, to everyone. And that can be really challenging to do, but the tools like Colorado Gives, tools like MightyCause, which is the platform behind Colorado Gives Day, are really useful for that. And so are most other email tools have segmentation ability. What becomes really critical, I think, is discipline and resource time to actually make sure that when someone is put into your list, that they are tagged appropriately so that they can be segmented later. So that means, like, for your whole list, like, you want to know who's a recurring donor, you want to know if someone's a lapsed donor. All of that information becomes really important so that you can actually create messages and a messaging cadence that is more likely to result in a donation, in someone converting. And you're right, this isn't 100% a made up idealized scenario and is not like real. It's it is a path that someone could take, right? And I think your point is also well taken, that this is focused on mostly the digital realm, although you'll notice at the beginning of this narrative, there is other types of contact, right? This Rebecca, she attends a workshop, she decides to do the certification program. So there's like a deeper level of engagement and involvement with the work of the organization that she ends up supporting. And I think that is often critical for donors, is they need to be invested. And if they are just a passive recipient of emails, that's not always enough to get someone to actually convert. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that the vast majority of people that you email and that you reach on social media are not going to convert to become donors. The conversion rate, which I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's like 0.25% or something like that, conversion rate on like fundraising appeals, and in particular. So it's challenging to actually get someone to move from an engaged person who's receiving your emails and is interested in your organization to a donor. So no matter what you do, no matter how good your program is, it's still going to be a real challenge to convert new people. And that's one of the reasons why knowing what your conversion rate is and knowing what other key metrics are, like how many donors you have, how many people you're targeting in a campaign, and how many have converted in the past, is really important, because it helps you set realistic goals and not feel disappointed when you're just looking at a number. Because you can look at a number and numbers tell you something, but when you are able to look at like percentages, like and things like conversion rates, you can have a better understanding of the overall performance of a campaign or of a fundraising program in general. That was a lengthy response. Was that helpful?
Yeah, it is. And I guess just to follow that up, will we go I see, Jordan, thank you about customizing your thank you response to donors on our Call to Gives page. So that's one, how that kind of answers my question. Is if we will go into, or if you can suggest ways that we can consider better disseminating the content our followers want, like is our surveys or like quick, like I'm just curious digitally what ways we can best be able to decipher what content our email subscribers are interested in to therefore increase that potential conversion.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talked about surveys. A survey is going to be your most reliable way to get that information. Keeping the survey very, very short and simple is going to be really helpful, but I would suggest sending out an email that says, what are you interested in hearing about? And sending people like a 2-3 question type survey that allows people to respond to that and gives you a better sense of what they, what they want to hear, what they're interested in. And then based on that, if you're also collecting their email information when they answer that survey, you would then be able to segment them further within your platform. You could tag them based on the types of content they're interested in, or however you want to slice and dice this up so that people are receiving more targeted content. Now, I will say that increases the lift on you as a person, right? Because then if you're creating separate content for different list segments, that's more of a lift, right? Because you have to do more writing, you have to generate more stuff. It's a good strategy, but it's only as good as the resources that you have. Oh, yes, Jordan. Yes, A/B testing is also a tried and true tool of the trade. But usually A/B testing is kind of smaller tweaks, which can also have an impact, but it can be things like changing up the email headline to an email, or switching around the placement of content within an email to see like if you can increase your click rate by, say, like putting a link closer to the top of an email, or multiple places, or changing the way that you design a button and sending out the same email, sending out 2 different versions of the same email to a split list and seeing which one performs better. That can be a very illuminating tactic. And you don't always have to do a lot of changing. You typically actually don't want to do like completely radically different things. You want to tweak small things to see how you can optimize your email. So I think I was going to do a small group discussion next, but I actually think I'm going to go ahead and go into benchmarks since y'all had some questions around that. And I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the benchmarks from them in our report. So, and again, these are all available in the support materials, so you'll have access to a PDF of this information as well. These are benchmarks that are specific to the digital world, and it's broken out by type. So ad benchmarks. I'm not going to go too much into these because I want to get to the ones that I heard questions about from instead. For email, let's pause here. This is broken out by email type because different types of emails will typically have a different click rate. So the average click rate for this last year for the nonprofits that M&R sampled was 1.5%. Newsletter click rate was hovered around 1.1%, and the click rate for welcome series, I think unsurprisingly, is higher at 3.2%. Because the welcome series, right, you're getting someone new, they're going to be more likely to want to interact with information that you shared with them. So your welcome series is really a very important part of your process, both from the beginning of when you get someone to sign up to your newsletter to like the welcome series that someone might receive if they're a new donor, and you customizing those and having content that is short, to the point, but also engaging and gives them an opportunity to learn more about your organization or to take another action. That's prime real estate. Unsubscribe rate average is 0.19%. The unsubscribe rate for advocacy type emails is 0.15, and the subscribe rate for newsletters is 0.19, and the unsubscribe rate for welcome newsletters is 1%. And the reason that the welcome rate is higher in all likelihood is because some people may like do a blitz of signing up for things and then realize that they don't actually want to be on another email list, so they unsubscribe. So it shouldn't, I would say it's not concerning that you see a higher unsubscribe rate with welcomes, with a welcome series in terms of the benchmarks. I think that's to be expected. Are there any questions about the benchmarks here for email before I move on? Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the data source for this?
This is all from M&R benchmarks report.
Okay.
And I can actually, let me just go back to,
Oh, if it's in the resources, I can find it, sorry.
well, there's, so the digital benchmarks and then fundraising takeaways, you'll see in parentheses, it says M&R, and that's because it's pulled from the M&R report. But I'm going to actually just give you the link to the full report so that if you want to just take a look at it later on, you can. I recommend it. It's a great report. We, of course, have synthesized this information for you, but there's just a ton, there's a wealth of information within that report. And they put it out every year. It's probably my favorite resource for reporting. Although there's other great reports out there, I think that one is really holistic and covers a lot of really important ground. And I think they do a good job with their analysis. But there's like Blackbaud and Classy and other like platforms in particular will put out fundraising specific reports that are also useful to take a look at. All right, so for your list, overall list growth rate last year for nonprofits was negative, a -2%. And then this is all split out by nonprofit type, which saw different kinds of results. Environmental and health were same as the overall growth rate, -2%. Hunger and poverty, though, your list for hunger and poverty related nonprofits grew by 3%, but human rights declined by 3%. And that's going to look a little bit different every year, right? So like every time in the spring, you're going to want to look at whatever benchmark reports you go to that are your resource to see what happened the year prior, because all of these figures are going to look a little bit different. All right, and finally, benchmarks related specifically to fundraising, as in like the conversion stage. Your average revenue per email appeal is 9 cents. The click rate for email appeals is 0.54%, and your percentage of overall revenue from email, that's like revenue for your whole program, right? Not just digital, is about 14% of nonprofits revenue was generated through email fundraising. The unsubscribe rate for fundraising email was 0.18%. And the email donation conversion rate is 0.09%. So this is what I was saying. I guessed like too high even. This is the conversion rate that you're working with. So if you see that you're not getting a ton of new donors through an email campaign, that's because it's really, really hard to get someone to convert and become a donor through an email campaign or through any kind of campaign, honestly, right? It's difficult. Donation page conversion rate is 19%. And this is a little bit of a tricky one because this has to do with like someone has received an email, right, with a link to the donation page. They've clicked on that email, and then after that they have and then after that they've submitted their donation. So the conversion rate here is really looking at a comparison of the rate of people who actually clicked and loaded the page and donated. So it's like several steps to actually get there. So this is not just like anybody visited a page and converted. And those are the benchmarks that I think are probably most critical for folks to be aware of. And again, these are external benchmarks, right? This is aggregated from many nonprofits who all have different budgets, work in different areas. So take these not with a grain of salt exactly, but think about, don't just apply them to your organization and be like, oh, I'm not measuring up, because there's a lot of context involved here. That's why it's so important to measure your own results so that you can benchmark against your own internal numbers. Okay, let's see. All right, now if there are no questions about this, I want to go ahead and move into small group discussion. Let me just slide through all of these. I went kind of out of order here, y'all, so I have to find the right slide. All right, so what I want to do now is have y'all break up into small groups and discuss what are some of the challenges to obtaining and using fundraising to advance your fundraising goals, and what are some strategies to tackle those challenges. And that could be all sorts of things. It could have to do with the platforms that you're on. It could have to do with your resource capacity, all of that. And I'm going to go ahead and drop this question into chat as well so that you guys can see it. And you'll have 15 minutes to discuss. And then I will bring everyone back, and someone from each discussion group should share back with the class what the kind of like summary of what y'all talked about, what you learned. You can verbally share that. You can drop it in chat. I don't, either is fine, but please do be prepared to share back with the class what you discussed. Any questions before I go ahead and do breakout rooms? I hope that you had a productive chat in your breakout rooms. So I am going to now ask y'all to share back what you discussed. Just the highlights about it, about a minute. If you would rather drop that in chat, that's fine, but I'd love also if you wanted to speak up verbally. I don't have a great process for figuring out who should go first. So Abby.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I can go. Yeah, so our group really talked about a lot of things, but really the basis is kind of knowing where to begin and knowing how to track the data and what platforms to use to track that data. And also for many of us in our group, our resources, being very small organizations, and having the resource and the time to track the data, plus doing the content creation, plus sending the newsletters. And yeah, we also talked about different platforms that we personally use and what we liked about them and what we don't like about them, how they do on tracking analytics, and other ways to maybe gain resources. We talked about using college interns. I had one who was a social media expert, and it was the best intern I've ever had. So just different ways to plug in people.
That's great. Yeah, interns are always a helpful resource, although you train them up and then they go away, which is always sad. All right, who would like to share next?
I can go.
All right, perfect. Go ahead.
So I think that a lot of us always kind of circle back to capacity and resources. We're a bit nervous to add another thing to our plate, especially since a lot of us don't have experience with this sort of thing. But then we also talk about how a lot of us, especially with smaller donor databases, like do a lot of things by hand. We reach out to people personally, we make a lot of phone calls. And because those aren't mass emails, those aren't social media like things, it's a lot harder to track those analytics, or at least according to my understanding, it is. Because yeah, those don't have really quick rates. So that, yeah, that kind of made it a bit more difficult for us.
So like phone calls, things like that.
Yeah, or like every time someone signs up for our newsletter, like I send out a personal like introductory email to them, like not from the database, but from my email. So that's like harder to track than like a mass email.
Yeah, for things like that, that's where a personalized welcome series kind of comes in handy, because then you can have tracking on there. But when it comes to some of that other personal touch outreach, which is so critical, then you have to like create a, you have to have a donor management system that allows you to enter that kind of information in there so that you can track it. And that obviously is a manual process, which is time intensive for sure. All right, who would like to share next? Nicole, you've got your hand raised.
All right, great. Well, some of the challenges, of course, we started with challenges because those are easy to identify. Is, a lot of the organizations that were in our group, we have data that we can analyze, but it hasn't been tagged in ways that are kind of intentional or would be helpful for purposes in which we're looking at it now. And so having some of that historic data, but not having, when it was collected, it wasn't really collected in a way that was particularly meaningful or tagged properly. So we sort of have some inaccuracies. And so historical data can be a little bit difficult. But then also we talked about, of course, staff capacity and deciding who, can help us collect some of the data that we need. Is the process that we're collecting, the ways in which we're collecting it kind of consistent? Developing a process for that can be a little bit challenging, as you have to train other people, make sure that they're, our brains all work so differently. My process is different for collecting data than other people who were in the role before me. So some of these challenges really related to the historical data. But those led to the, strategies, or some really great solutions in the strategies, which is just, when you're scrubbing your system, start with an easy, workable time frame to scrub your data. I liked Terry called it, in our group called it the pre-work, sort of going through all of the data that we already have, scrubbing it in a way, but thinking of something manageable, maybe just the last 2 to 3 years, depending on the amount of data that you have, so that you can create some real accurate basis for your analysis. And then, keeping the process simple, utilizing the tools that MightyCause already has, utilizing the systems, utilizing MightyCause, using the systems that MightyCause has to organize your data. Those Jordan posted a couple of things, the checkout flow, and so keeping some of those things simple would be a really great strategy to kind of help get the data together in a way that is usable. I think that's really what it all comes down to, is creating data collection that is usable. And so that's, and then if there's anything I forgot, group 3, let us jump in.
All right.
Right. Sorry, Elsa.
No, go ahead.
I'm just interjecting. I just wanted to add something that we at Colorado Gives Foundation are trying to actively pay attention to, is also, of course, making sure you're collecting data that's usable, but also not collecting not useful data. So like not sending out surveys that you're not going to take action on that data, so I think that's a process for us that we're doing. So I would just include that. I'm also going to chat in here just an FAQ about telephone numbers. So how in Colorado Gives, in your checkout flow, you can make sure that you're collecting telephone numbers, because I heard that a lot just in these discussions.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jordan. All right, I think there are 2 more groups left. So who would like to raise their hand and go next? Yes, Susan.
I was in breakout room 4, and our conversation mostly centered on how do you actually get the donors or potential donors to collect data on, right? So that was the biggest hurdle for most of us, since we were serving low income, uninsured, newly immigrated populations. So actually, Jordan had a great resource, the corporate challenge option that's available now, which sounds like a really exciting possibility for us. I mean, it used to be a really great way for me to get in front of potential donors when we worked closely with United Way, and we would go out with them, you know, to make presentations to major corporations, and it doesn't really work that way anymore. So I'm excited to hear about the corporate challenge options. And then a lot of us also are working with other regulations over us, whether it's FTC or HIPAA, things like that. So we can't exactly just convert our patient base or the people using our services into potential donors. So yeah, we raised a lot of challenges. We have a lot of challenges and didn't come up with a ton of solutions. So
Sometimes you have to identify the challenges first and then, you know, marinate on it for a little while before you can reach a solution. These are thorny issues.
well, then we got that part accomplished.
Great. All right. So could the last group go ahead and share what you discussed?
So I was in breakout room 4 with Susan, and yeah, we all share like the same type of problems in terms of, you know, converting zero time of people and stuff. In my case, was slightly different because we do education, and for example, Susan does healthcare, which I really got interested into her project. I would like to know more information of your project, Susan. And it was amazing to see how we all, even if we're like doing different stuff, or like in my case that I'm from a different country myself, we're facing the same problems and as non-profits, and you know, and what we're doing is like really helping our communities. So this is like eye-opening, you know, pretty amazing to connect with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Javier. I'm glad that you're finding it useful. All right, so that is a wrap on everyone sharing out. So next up is just a quick review of practical strategies around data collection. And then I am going to cede back about 20 minutes or so of the remainder of class time for y'all to work on your strategic plans. And then we'll come together for the last few minutes to just kind of wrap everything up. Okay, so this was pretty fast and straightforward. But it also speaks to a lot of the issues that y'all raised in your own discussions, which is how to actually do data collection analysis in a way that is workable for you. And these are some of the questions that I think are useful to pose and get answers on to help you proceed towards a way of collecting and analyzing data that actually helps you rather than just adds another thing to your plate that you don't really have time for. First, I would ask, what matters the most for your work? So honing in, like we talked about, on the most critical data points to measure and paying attention to those. And as Jordan said, don't just collect data for the sake of it, collect only what is actually going to be actionable for you. And then the next question I would pose is, what do you need to know to steward your resources effectively? And this is just kind of another way of asking, like, what is the data that you really need to collect? But thinking about it from a little bit of a different angle. And then what's possible given your current resources, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the resources to invest in it, you can't really do it. You can't really get it off the ground. So that is kind of like ground zero. As much as you may need or want data, if you don't have the resources to analyze it, then you may need to come up with a plan for how you're going to do that eventually, but it may not be a priority, or you may need to use the default resources that are built within a tool and have those work for you for the time being until you can further develop your data collection and analysis plan. So just being practical about what is actually possible for you and your organization. And then that kind of gets to the final question, which what's really mission critical? What do you really, really need to know in order to accomplish the work that you're doing? Those are the things that I would really think about and consider. when you are dealing with the question of what data to collect, how to collect it, and what analysis to perform. I think one of the beautiful things about being in this cohort is the fact that you're all on MightyCause. And so at least for the data that sits within that platform now that you're using it, you already have data being automatically collected for you, some data, which is really, really useful, and some base level kind of results that you can look at in there. And then if you have the bandwidth, you can do some further analysis on it, but at least you've got some like basics, a basic starting point. And Jordan, not to put you on the spot too much, but since you are a resident MightyCause expert, I was wondering if there might be some additional things that you would like to share about that, recommendations for how to best deploy and use MightyCause features related to the program, especially when it comes to like data analysis or collecting data that you want to talk about. And I do
Yeah.
screenshot
sorry.
here of the two this is of kind of the two places where you're going to find data. This is the overview. So here's where you're going to get a snapshot of like your online donations, donors, what you've raised, things like that. And you can set the time frame, so you can see different time frames for this. And then within reports, you can look at donations, you can look at donation type, campaign type, et cetera. And then there's some additional features available depending on whether you have the essential or the advanced package. All right, and now I'm done talking. I'll turn it over to you, Jordan. Sorry.
No, that was great. Yeah, as far as like data tracking, everything that is flowing through this system that's captured on, on a donor, is available in this donation report. And so what you see when you're logged in and viewing is just kind of a summary. When you download your donations report from your organization page, that's going to give you the full picture. And so line by line, it's going to show you each donation. It updates in real time. And I think maybe the important things within the donations report that are helpful, you can see the source of a donation. So is it coming from a widget that you embed, or your embeddable donation form? Is it coming directly from your page? Is it coming from a fundraiser page that you're doing for your board members? So just kind of understanding the source of the donation. Easiest ways to kind of segment and decide how you might talk to and nurture that donor after the initial donation. So source column, really important. And then I think, retention, have they donated before? Are they new? What kind of donation, one time versus is it a recurring donation? So those kind of, simple things, that's all available to you within your organization's report. So that would be kind of my gut as far as like the basics that you should be looking at to kind of understand who's coming through your organization page or any additional pages that you've set up through Colorado Gives. Is there more specific questions I can answer, Elsa, that you were hoping that I would touch on?
I don't think so. Those are kind of the highlights for me, but does anyone have immediate questions that you'd like to ask?
I think the other thing I'll mention here, in addition to, of course, the reports, is that for those of you who have the advanced features, just again, a reminder that you have access to a basic CRM system. So the ability to start tagging within the advanced features, your donors. You also have the ability to integrate. And so to me, this is the most valuable piece, maybe besides the embeddable donation form of the advanced features, is the ability for you to move that data from Colorado Gives to whatever your marketing or donor management system is. And so you, in a couple of easy clicks, are able to set up those integrations through your advanced features. So that's all that's coming to top of mind as far as like metrics and places where it's where you can access those metrics on the platform. But if anything else comes up, I'm happy to kind of meet one-on-one with anybody or join office hours in the future, anything like that.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. All right. So what I would like to do now is go ahead and split y'all back out into, I think, smaller breakout rooms, and you'll have about 20 minutes to just independently work on your strategic plan. Would anyone like me to go over the strategic plan again, or do you have any questions specific to completing it before you have some dedicated time to work on this again?
I wouldn't mind you going over it again. Like I say, I'm a mess today, so that would be great.
Yeah, no problem, not at all. And Jordan, you also said you would what?
Like you to go over it again, just because
Oh.
I'm working on it too. Yeah, and a refresher would be awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Sorry. Okay, let me go ahead and I guess I'll pull up the assignment actually for this so that we can just look at the assignment together again and we can kind of talk it through. No, wrong desktop. Okay, so the strategic plan, again, in terms of due dates, the outline should be pretty much wrapped up by the end of this class, but there's nothing to turn in at this point. It's really just about trying to set some goals so that you're progressing towards completion. You should be prepared to submit this plan by the end of the third class next month on August 8th. Okay, so in terms of the assignment details, this is where you will, I'm just going to pretty much read this verbatim to y'all. So basically the point of this is to create a high level strategic plan for your digital fundraising program for your organization. That's going to include several different key elements, including what your North Star or goal is for your organization and how those tie into the goal that you have for your fundraising program. You're going to want to include typically what the key metrics are that you want to measure, who your audiences are that you're focusing on, what your key messages are, and what your main content areas are going to be focused around. And then also like an outline or an overview of, or like a bulleted list of kind of like the key campaigns that you'll be running, as well as any kind of evergreen campaigns that you'll be engaged in. And then I also recommend creating a timeline that's on a monthly basis so that you have a sense of like the cadence of how things are rolling out. This is, Kim, you asked a good question. This was geared towards digital fundraising. However, if the way that you conceptualize your fundraising plan is to have it be comprehensive and you aren't doing a separate plan that is just focused on digital, then by all means, develop a comprehensive plan that is for your whole fundraising program. That includes like your direct mail and other types of outreach efforts. I also just want to emphasize that these are all recommendations, and even the outline that I have for y'all, that's also about suggestions for structure. It is not like handed down from God. You should use it in a way that is most beneficial to you. Like this is not a class like in college where, you know, follow these assignment guidelines. This is about like, you're in the real, you know, you're in the world, you're doing your job, you know how to do your job best. These should all, please take all of these things as tools that you can use to help you do your job better. So if you could, oh, Susan, you're so sweet. So if you can just conceptualize it like that, because I have had questions from people who felt concerned about like, oh, do I need to develop a content strategy or do I need to like create all this stuff? And it's like, no, put in here, this is really a mechanism for organizing the work that you're doing. Put in here what you can. Don't create work for yourself that you can't complete. Again, this is just meant to as a guide to help you figure out how to place the different things that you're doing. This final part here, the donor pathway, this is why I called what we talked about today, mapping the donor pathway, because we went through all of these different things. And this is the way that I've kind of conceptualized a strategic plan where you would identify the key activities that you would be engaged in for each of these steps along the pathway. So that would be like campaigns that you're running and things like that. And it's split up like that because this is the way that folks like me kind of conceptualize fundraising and like marketing and communication type work is there's all of these different pathway points, and like you want to kind of like think about the activities that you're engaged in there. If there's another way that you need to organize this for the purposes of getting things done in your organization, that's fine. You don't have to follow the structure exactly. Let's see, Brianna, you just sent me a direct message. You're confused on what nurture is. I'm stuck on this events and gestures, how to nurture in an online way instead of in person. Brianna, do you mind elaborating on that question a little bit more to me for the class? Because I think that other folks probably also have that question, and I'll do my best to answer.
Can I just jump on and say instead of trying to type it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, please do. Sorry, I should have clarified. Yes.
No worries.
Anytime you feel free to jump in and speak.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused with the nurturing is nurture. Is it more of how do you online nurture something versus like, is this like sending thank you cards or doing like thank you donor events or like a volunteer lunch and learn? Like how do you nurture this on an online email? After kind of reading this, I feel like I was misunderstanding what nurture meant.
That's a really good question. And I think, and if it's helpful for your program to think about nurturing in the context of both in-person and digital, that's great, because I think the most effective nurturing activities are a combination of both usually. You may use the tools at your disposal, but you already mentioned a lot of things that are critical for nurture. Nurture is really about engagement, continuing to keep someone interested, continuing to keep the work that you're doing on the radar of the person who's receiving your emails or who's attending your events, who's in your universe. And some of the key tactics for that in a digital space would be the old tried and true content creation, right? At the end of the day, if someone is like visiting your website or getting an email from you, what are they getting? They're getting content. So creating solid quality content is really important. Sometimes that doesn't mean creating something new. Sometimes that means thinking about how to present the information that you already have at your fingertips in a different way. So I can try and give you an example. Can you tell me what it is that your organization does? What kind of work are you doing? What kind of content do you already have created?
So we are like a community outreach. So we have a food pantry, a thrift store that hands out clothing vouchers. We do empowerment classes, and then we also have youth sports programs. So it's a lot of low income, no income families can participate. So I do have newsletters that go out once a month, but it's kind of like what's happening more or less. So I guess I was just trying to figure out like, what does it mean to nurture these relationships in a digital world versus like the in-person and giving of something?
Yeah, so I think that the informational newsletter that you're sending out is already a step along the nurture chain. I think if you're able to split out program participants from folks who are potential donors or who aren't using your services but are interested in supporting the work that you do, that might be a good opportunity to be able to tell some different stories, because the audience of folks who aren't using your services for themselves but are interested in supporting that type of work is going to be a little bit different. So you can, instead of providing just information about what's coming up, you could share information about the impact that your services have, or important like statistics or numbers about how many people are being served, or personal stories about how your programs have had a positive impact on someone's life, things like that. It's really, I don't want to say it's not complicated, because of course it's complicated, but in terms of like a lot of the things that you need to do, it's not like you need to necessarily do something completely new or different. Sometimes it's more about refining what you're already doing by figuring out how to create information or content that is more targeted and more nuanced for different types of people. But it can also look like some additional things that maybe you're not doing now. So like maybe you might want to introduce the SMS text messaging for key moments in your campaign targeted at folks who you think are highly probable in terms of being potential donors. That could be a new mode of communication outside of email. In terms of outside of digital, you might want to do a fundraiser event, or maybe you have some virtual workshops or events to push people towards, or maybe there's volunteer opportunities that you could share with people as a different way of getting engaged. Because the more embedded someone is in your organization, I think the more likely they are to donate. Is that, do you have follow-ups from that? Was that a helpful answer?
It was a helpful answer. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are just gonna wrap up now, but before I let you go, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have any follow-up questions for me about the work that you're doing or anything else related to the class today. And also, of course, if you do have additional questions other than this week, I'll be available during regularly scheduled office hours. And you can always email me or Jordan as well if you have specific questions that you want addressed.
We had one come up that
Sure.
if you can't answer it quickly, we'll take it offline. It was related to the proof points that you request are outlined. Could you just provide some context around what we should be including there?
Yes, that was a question that someone also had during office hours. Let me go ahead and just share my screen really quick because I have an example. It's called messaging framework example, just so that if you want to look in the support materials, you can also see this yourself. Proof points are essentially proving, hence the proof part, the statements that you have that you've made. Like these are the things, these are your claims. Essentially, this is like, think of this in a rhetorical sense. I have a degree in rhetoric, so I apologize in advance for for that framing, everybody, but you got to bear with me. All right, so this is your primary argument, right? Is your mission statement essentially. Then secondarily, you have your supporting arguments about your organization. In this case, this example is Firefly, my organization. We're an agency. We want to work with nonprofits and provide services to them. So our proof points are our secondary kind of messages / arguments are around why you should hire us to do things for you. The proof points are sort of demonstrating that we are who we say we are, that we are, that the things that we're stating about ourselves are accurate and have sort of ethos behind them. They're credible. So we can expand, if our mission is to work towards a better future for you, and one of the things that we do is amplify your mission and connect with your community, and we're also progressive, then one of the things that demonstrates that proves that that's true is that we're women-led and we focus on equity. Another proof point for us would be how many clients we serve, that we have a lot of experience, that we have a dedicated team. That's what a proof point is. It's kind of like it's a little bit different than a talking point, but similar to a talking point. You could think of them as talking points too. Does that provide clarity, or have I confused y'all further?
That helped me.
It's hard to be a digital room, everybody.
Can I ask another question that came up in our group?
Yeah, sure.
We just were hoping for a little bit of linkage between kind of this outline that we're working on now and then the Colorado Gives Day assignment, just so it was clear in our head.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the link is really that, so when you're putting together your strategic plan, you're thinking about your entire year and like your overall program and what your goals are. Colorado Gives Day is a specific campaign that you're running that will help you to achieve the goals that you've set out in your larger fundraising plan. And and if you're creating your fundraising plan using the outline that I provided, And you have that, I don't know why I'm just like talking at y'all and not actually showing you an example. That would be helpful. Here, give me a second. Okay, so let's say you've got your strategic plan. I would put Colorado Gives Day here under Convert as a key activity. And elaborate a little bit more on like what you're going to do for Colorado Gives Day. Like in brief, what does your campaign look like? The purpose of then creating the campaign plan is to flesh out all those details so that you can actually run the campaign. So this is really about like that big tent sort of umbrella. The strategic plan covers all of the things that you need to do for your digital fundraising program throughout the year or for your fundraising program. Then a campaign plan is specific to something that you're actually going to operationalize, like Colorado Gives Day or end of year giving, or if you have an event, you've got to have a plan for that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure. Okay, then I think we are good to go. Thanks everyone for attending. Jordan, did you want to do kind of like a debrief again like we did last time, or?
I think we're good to go. I feel great. I hope everybody else feels great and has a good idea of kind of next steps and the resources to get you there. But obviously, reach out to either of us or both of us if you have any questions or just need a little extra support.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all again, and I will see you next month or during office hours.